Hi, a week or two ago we received an email from a viewer, David Hernandez, who asked a question about how to achieve what he called a grid masking effect, and he gave a link to a website that had a tutorial showing how to do this with Photoshop. And you can see it here, the type of effect we're talking about. Okay, and we can achieve this pretty easily. Of course, what it is a bitmap underneath, and it's masked by a certain grid of rectangular objects. So we're going to try to achieve that same thing in Inkscape. I think it's probably a fair bit easier than it is to do with Photoshop, from my perspective anyways. So we'll get started. First thing we'll do is open up or import a bitmap to use. So here's the bitmap I'm going to use. And then first things first, I guess we'll create the rectangle that we're going to use for the grid. Something like this. Maybe we'll make it 80 by, I don't know, let's say 50. Okay, we'll zoom in here. We'll double click it, just make sure our corners are the way we want them to be. And now to create the grid of rectangles, the way I like to do it is probably a simplistic way, but I'll select this and I'm going to make an array first of all of 3 by 3 array, so 9 objects. So I'll select that object and I'll hit Control D to make 8 more copies. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can verify that, window it, see down the status bar there's 9 objects. So I will say object, with all 9 selected, I'll say object, rows and columns, which brings up this dialog. And I'm just going to increase the rows so we get 3 rows, 3 columns. And we'll just try out the spacing. I like using this method because I can hit a range and see what it looks like. If it's not what I want, I can hit Control Z and change this spacing, and then just hit arrange again. So say we wanted to do spacings of 12 in each direction between objects. So we'll probably even go tighter. Maybe we'll try 8. Let me hit Control Z. There. So that's probably what we want. So right now I've got 9 objects. I want more than that, obviously. So what I do is window the 9, hit Control G, group them, and I'm going to create, let's say, 9 more of these grids. Okay, so again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 9 of them with all 9 selected. Again, I hit this to make 3 rows and 3 columns. We'll keep the spacing the same. And there we get our grid of rectangles. Next, I will I want to add some text in this as well. So what I'll do is start the text tool. Let's get a word here. Sexy. Okay, because Inkscape, of course, is very sexy. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-T to bring up the text and font dialog. See if I can shrink that down a little bit. And I'm going to choose something a little bit different for the font. Probably something like this. Apply. And I'll likely, don't need this anymore. I will likely just, while that's selected, I'll make it the same properties as the rectangle. And now what I'll do is, I want to insert it somewhere in here, maybe these 6 blocks or these 8 blocks. So let's see what we can do. Maybe we'll just, we can hold Control, just drag that up. Get it approximately the same height and length. Just move it over slightly. Okay, so we'll put that in the middle there. Actually, you know what? Let's make it down to fit only in here. And you can do this more exact, but if you've watched any of my screencasts, you know that just about everything I do is by eye. And now we'll just take this, move it up out of the way, and we're going to, actually forgot something here. Let's make things easy here. Move this over, window all these, and we want to ungroup them because we still got those groups of 9. Control Shift G. You look down here now, I've got 81 objects of type rectangle. So we'll move this back into where we want it, somewhere here. We're going to hold Shift, click these, hit delete. We're going to bring this down and plunk it in where we want it. So let's say it's something like this. Okay, so that's what we have built here. What I have to do now is window all of this stuff, which is 78 objects of type rectangle and text. I want all of these things to be the path type. So I'm going to do path, object to path. Now there's 78 objects of type path. Everything's a path. To simplify the clipping that we're going to do, I also want to take all these objects and just make it one path. So I can do that by combining the path here. Now it's all one object. It's one path object with 682 nodes. So those are really the two things that I need. I need this path and I need my bitmap. I'm going to duplicate these, okay, for a couple of reasons. I'm going to try something at the end, and also if I make a mistake I have a backup copy here. Now what I'll want to do is actually bring this up on top, overlay it on top of my bitmap, and of course if you don't get this the right size, I just lucked out. You can always hold Control and scale it to get it where you want and how you want it laid out. So you arrange that where you want it. Make sure that the path object is on top of the bitmap. Select both, and then Object, Clip, Set. There we go. Pretty simple. Okay, so that bitmap behind could be a variety of different bitmaps clipped together like they show on that website. Or you can, for the sake of simplicity here, I've just had one bitmap behind. Alright, so there's our clipped object. That's really it. Now, what I'll try with this one is, I'll take that same path, but I'm going to kind of put it in perspective a little bit. So we'll just draw a quick type of rectangle like that. Select the object, then the path. As you might note, in earlier versions of Inkscape you had to do that in the opposite order. Now you select the object and then the perspective shape. It was reversed before, so if you're using 0.45, Inkscape 0.45, you might have to select those in the opposite order. Then Effects, Modify Path, Perspective. And let my machine chug away here for a second. Get a sip of coffee. Somebody needs a new computer. There we go. So there's our, get rid of that. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to bring this on top of the bitmap. And we're going to shrink, of course, shrink this down a little bit so it's all within the bitmap. Okay. Select both, Object, Clip, Set. Okay. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a reflection under this, and I know Heathen X did this an episode or two ago. I did have one additional point about doing it that probably I can illustrate here. One small point. So anyways, we'll take this object that we've created. We will hit Control D to duplicate it. We will mirror it, pull it down. We want to make sure the corners are fairly close. Okay. Now here's where a little bit of the difference is. Normally what we do is say skew this up. If you do that, you can see that you've got to skew it and then move it up and skew it and move it up and try and get it lined up properly. So what I found is easier is when you have the skew, when you select the object once and then select it again, you get a little crosshair in the middle. What I want to do is drag that crosshair up to the top right corner. I jumped around here a bit. Okay, come on. I'm not sure why it's not staying. And that crosshair tells it where it should rotate around. Okay, so the idea, if I can get it to work. There we go. Is to keep it up in the top right. Then we skew up. And now we don't have to do that align, move and align thing. We can just skew it up to make it match. Then we'll do a quick mask here. Just draw a rectangle or a polygon fairly close to what we want. We will change the fill and stroke of that to turn off the stroke, make the fill a gradient, edit the gradient to be a black and a fully opaque white. We'll grab the gradient tool and we'll adjust it. Something like this. Okay, then we'll select both objects, object, mask, set, and there we have our reflection. So that's basically it. Neat way to do some clipping, get some neat effects, and use those bitmap files in Inkscape. Okay, thank you very much for watching.